This video is brought to you by SteelSeries' all-new QCK Performance line, giving you the choice of both size and surface so that you can find a mousepad that feels tailor-made to meet your needs. Get 12% off your purchase when you use offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com. Click the link below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Assassin's Creed Shadows is a tricky game to talk about, and I'll tell you why. So much of what AC Shadows is new or evolved or refined or a response to criticisms people had about the modern AC trilogy. So much of it is different than what has come before it, and in most instances, those differences are an improvement. At the same time, the core pillars of the modern AC games remain as load-bearing here in Shadows as they do in the other games, and by that I mean this still feels like a game you've played before because foundational elements like writing, quest design, open world design, side activities, X-ray vision, etc., they remain unchanged. For that reason, I don't think anyone should go into this expecting an experience that feels markedly different than what has come before it. You will definitely note the numerous ways that AC Shadows looks to refine and expand the formula, but many of those changes sit at the surface level, and once the novelty of those things wears off, you're eventually going to come back to some core elements that either work for you or they don't. And that is a really crucial point to engage with here, because for many people, more Assassin's Creed is just fine by them. You know what these games are, you go in with eyes open, you know there's going to be lots of goons to assassinate and map markers to clear, and the chance to do that in a new historical setting is fine. And I want to stress that for that type of player, Assassin's Creed Shadows is an instant buy. This game will absolutely deliver what you expect, and there's a very good chance that you'll enjoy a number of the changes that Ubisoft have made here, particularly to the stealth and traversal stuff, where playing as Nawe is just fantastic. She feels great. But there is another category of person, and I count myself among them. It's that person who looks at this franchise and is often frustrated by its wasted potential, frustrated by the weak writing, the laborious game structure, the subpar combat, the focus on quantity over quality. For those people, Assassin's Creed Shadows carried with it the hope that, hey, maybe it'll be different this time. Unfortunately, it's just not. Yes, it is shorter. My playthrough was around 40 hours long, but that still felt too long and too drawn out because those foundational elements remain weak. The writing is terrible. Similar to most other Ubisoft games, the anthology-based game structure makes it very difficult to build a cohesive narrative or develop memorable characters. It also completely buries the lead, where the riveting Templar vs. Assassin stuff only properly picks up in the last 5 hours of the game, where the preceding 35 hours are just so inane that I can barely remember any of it. I also struggle to remember any specific town or landmark I visited because, like I said, they all blur into one given Ubisoft's quantity over quality approach to world design. The stealth stuff is really solid, absolutely, but the combat is just not up to par in 2025. It's just not. It's messy, basic, uninteresting combat with a really low skill ceiling and a disappointing lack of enemy variety. And it's a problem laid very bare by the game's most ambitious design choice, having not one but two protagonists, with Nawe embodying the shinobi assassin fantasy and Yasuke embodying the samurai brawler fantasy. This was a really interesting experiment, but in my view, it has categorically failed. Nawe's full stat kit of stealth, traversal, assassinations, and full frontal combat make her a joy to play. In contrast, Yasuke's kit, which is exclusively focused on combat, makes him feel like he's a video game character that's wandered into the wrong game. And to be super clear, that has nothing to do with the color of his skin. And I'll go even further and say that some of the narrative high points of this game were the ones dealing with Yasuke's history before he came to Japan, or the ones where he's staring down prejudice. I was all in on that stuff, I really was. Every complaint I have about Yasuke is on a mechanical level, and it really boils down to the fact that his kit does not align with the overall design of this video game. It's like dropping RoboCop into a Mario 64 level. It just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work. That disappointing aspect aside, Shadows is a game that successfully evolves a number of the more surface level aspects of this formula without doing any major renovation to its foundations. If you were already happy with modern AC games and you just wanted another one, then I think you're going to enjoy yourself with Shadows. But if you were looking for more than that, then unfortunately you're not going to find it here.
Alone, we are nothing, but together.
Assassin's Creed Shadows is the worst written of the modern AC quadrilogy, though it does manage to clear the very low bar set by Mirage I am going to say plenty of good things about this game, believe me, but better to rip the band-aid off when it comes to the writing. The premise of this story is a surprisingly strong one. Yasuke came to Japan with the Portuguese as a slave, but the warlord Oda Nobunaga, who was attempting to unify Japan through conquest, lifted Yasuke up out of slavery and into his service as a samurai. Yasuke rode with Nobunaga during the sacking of Iga, a region of Japan that was home to Nawe. Nawe's life was ruined that night when her homeland was razed to the ground and her father was murdered by a band of masked assailants called the Shinbakufuku. Similarly, Yasuke's life was upturned when Oda Nobunaga was betrayed by an upstart general. Both untethered from the bonds of family or feudal service, Yasuke and Nawe begin their quest of vengeance, unawares of the darker forces orchestrating the events that have torn their lives asunder. So you might be thinking, okay, so Yasuke helped destroy Nawe's life. Why are they working together now? Well, that's a great question, and it'd be really nice if the game dwelled on it for more than a single cutscene. Unfortunately though, that irreconcilable tension between them is reconciled in their very first meeting, and after that it's barely referenced again as Nawe and Yasuke form an immediate connection and fellowship, one based on unquestioning trust in one another, despite the fact that they literally just met and Yasuke quite literally ruined her life. It's an example of how much AC Shadows leaves on the table when it comes to its protagonists. They're both of them on this quest for vengeance, both of them tumbling down a rabbit hole they couldn't have possibly seen coming in their wildest imaginings, but they feel like two ships passing in the night. They comment on what's going on around them without ever really confronting each other, and as a result, the bond between them feels weak and unearned. Sadly, the dynamic between them feels like a total whiff.
Will he live?
The wound is not deadly. It will be another scar to blame on his brother.
He almost cost us the fight and got himself killed.
He was trying to save his family. We would both do the same.
So if that chemistry isn't there, are Yasuke and Nawe at least good characters in their own right? I mean, I think they're okay. I spent 90% of my playthrough playing as Nawe, and I definitely appreciated her steely determination. She's got some real fire in her at times, and I liked that she was unafraid to bare her fangs. Yasuke as well is fine. I spent much less time with him, but again, he too can get pretty fiery, and he doesn't shy away from a fight either.
They call me Yasuke. Lord Oda Nobunaga gave me my sword. I accept your challenge. Samurai against samurai. Blood against blood. To the death.
I wish I had more words to describe these characters as separate from one another. One of the reasons the chemistry between them is so weak is because they're so similar. Nawe is a little more angry and vengeful, but ultimately she's just as stoic, honor-bound, and measured as Yasuke is. Again, I think the opportunity inherent in having two protagonists is that each could be really different from one another, and those differences could result in some really interesting narrative moments. But barring a few instances where they disagree about whether a target should live or die, there really isn't much light between them. It's yet another missed opportunity. What about the broader supporting cast? Well, it's honestly sort of difficult to call them a supporting cast given how optional they are and how completely disconnected they are from the main plot. So the way this works is that throughout their journeys, Nawe and Yasuke will meet and recruit people back to their hideout. After that time, there are side quest chains for each of them. They're entirely optional and in no way connected to the main plot that unfolds, making these characters feel very ancillary and making it very difficult to form any real attachment to them. That's an issue caused by the way that this game is structured, which is almost identical to Assassin's Creed Mirage. Rather than a singular, cohesive narrative, it's instead an anthology of completely disconnected storylines that you track on this objectives board. While some level gating will generally result in you completing certain objectives in certain orders, you can do a lot of this in whatever order you please, which sounds great on paper, but if you've played any Ubisoft game over the past decade, particularly AC Mirage, you'll know how much this undermines storytelling. It doesn't allow the writers to build a story or character sequentially, it makes it really difficult to have any meaningful character arcs, it becomes almost impossible to control story pacing. It's a great model if your focus is letting players do whatever they want, whenever they want. It's a terrible model if your goal is to tell a great story. So what of that story then? Does any of it survive this structure? Well, if you played Assassin's Creed Mirage, you're going to be very familiar with why this main plot is so bad. It's essentially a series of investigations trying to uncover who these masked individuals are that killed Nawe's father. The drill is always the same. Arrive at a region, get some obscure clue that leads you to a location, kill someone who happens to be carrying a note that leads you to another destination, clear out this bandit camp to find another clue that reveals the true identity of this masked person, invade their castle or stronghold or temple or whatever, listen to their little soliloquy about why their actions were actually justified before plunging a knife into their throat. Or don't, because you can actually choose to not kill people in this game. That's one thing it does. I did this loop like 12 times, and I really do struggle to remember the name of a single NPC or even the details of a single storyline. It's all spun up and then unwound so quickly that it's impossible to care about any of it. I contrast that with something like a Dragon Ishin, which is a single story that unfolds over 40 or so hours, and it is so engrossing, and every single character you meet is so memorable. Both of these stories are set in feudal Japan, but the contrast between the two of them could not be more stark. Assassin's Creed Shadows is a game where you will struggle to care about anything that's going on, and where you'll struggle to remember anyone's name. Ubisoft's structure-led design philosophy has done it again. Now, what makes this all the more infuriating is that this game has the same pivot at the back end that every other recent Ubisoft game has, where the story gets good because it's no longer constrained by structure, and so Ubisoft can start telling an actual story. I remember it happened with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where the last 10 hours of that game were all in on Greek mythology and the assassin stuff and Abstergo, and it was really fucking cool. I remember it happened with Star Wars Outlaws, where the squad of scoundrels was assembled and they could then start talking to each other. It happened again here in Shadows, where the first 35 hours of this game is just straight drivel, but the last 5 hours are fucking awesome. It has assassins v Templars, it has revelations about Yasuke's life as a slave, it has stuff about Nawe's family, it has massive lore reveals and cool cutscenes, and it has the most important and emotive scenes in the entire game for the protagonist. And all of this is buried in the last 5 hours of the game. When I was going through this, I was like, I cannot believe they have done this again. I cannot believe that they made us suffer through 35 hours of these boring, forgettable storylines when you could have just been telling this story instead. Now, obviously, you wouldn't tell only this story, you'd do a mix of A and B plots, but you'd weave this very compelling, engaging, riveting narrative into the rest of the game, so we'd be drip-fed reveals, and we'd be excited to wrap up regional storylines because it would let us reconnect to the plot line that we actually care about. Ubisoft's commitment to this free-form, open-ended anthology-style storytelling that kind of hastily wraps everything up in the last 5 hours is utterly baffling at this point. It has hamstrung so many Ubisoft games in the past, it ruined Mirage, and I think it does just as much damage here in Shadows, the difference being that Shadows manages to survive this poor writing thanks to how much else it offers. But if you were going into this hoping for a story that you could really become invested in, then AC Shadows will disappoint you in the same way that most Ubisoft games will. Undoubtedly, one aspect of Assassin's Creed Shadows that will impress everyone is its visuals. AC games have always been strong contenders in the visuals department, but no game in the series has looked this good, and there are so many layers to Ubisoft's accomplishment here. At the very basic level, this runs really well on PC, which is not typical for most Ubisoft games at launch, and most PC games in general these days, if I'm being honest. Running on a high-end PC at 4K max settings, I was able to comfortably clear 60 FPS with minimal frame stuttering. Other reviewers on lower-end hardware and consoles are reporting great performance as well, so that's a very good news story. In addition to that, throughout my 40-hour playthrough, I had only one crash, and more impressive than even that, this was overall a pretty bug-free experience, yet another rarity when it comes to a day one release from Ubisoft. To be clear, there were some minor things here or there, like some delayed sound effects or some cutscenes taking a moment to load, but yet contrasting this with your average open world game at release, this is pretty buttoned up, and you can absolutely see how Ubisoft used those delays to polish this to a brilliant shine. From a technical perspective, this is arguably Ubisoft's most accomplished release in a long time, and they definitely deserve a huge amount of credit for that. All that technology delivers a staggeringly beautiful rendition of feudal Japan. It is a more grounded rendition than Ghost of Tsushima, which leaned heavily into vibrant color palettes to create these unforgettable and heavily stylized canvases. Shadow's style is much closer to something like Rise of the Ronin, though the comparison between those two games doesn't do Rise of the Ronin any favors. Shadows trusts in the natural beauty of Japanese architecture and Japanese landscapes, and then works tirelessly to bring as much detail into that rendition as possible. It's then further enhanced by lighting that can transform scenes depending on the time of day, and it's further enhanced by the game's seasonal system. There are 4 seasons here, and the game will regularly shift from one to the next as time passes, and when it does, that utterly transforms the landscapes. A farmland in full summer harvest will be picked clean by autumn, with the surrounding tree line transformed from green to brown. When the winter hits, those farmland fields will now be covered in 10 inches of snow, which not only looks great, but it does slow Nawe and Yasuke as they attempt to move through it. That's really the only tangible impact that this seasonal model has on gameplay though, and as pretty as all this is, it would have been nice to have seen it have more effect beyond visual identity. So AC Shadows is a really pretty game, but there's actually a more important dimension to its beauty and its presentation, and it's actually one of the biggest strengths of the game. I think Ubisoft had a clear goal for themselves in that they wanted this experience to feel serene. So much of the game is about riding through natural landscapes as you head towards the next sync tower, and there's not a lot going on as you do that, but the landscape is always beautiful, and there isn't a lot of music in the game, and even when there is, it's very understated. A number of the side activities that you do also encourage mindfulness over mayhem. One example is meditation that Nawe does, which involves pressing a sequence of buttons, but as you do, the color fades and the buttons are replaced with Japanese words, and it's just really nice. I look at Odyssey and Valhalla, and those games were very, very loud. The crash of waves and the yell of the crew as you sailed the Mediterranean Sea, the cacophony of yelling as you raided an English monastery. Hell, one of the side activities in Valhalla was a straight-up drinking game. Looking back on those experiences, they echo loudly in your memory. Shadows is a very different vibe, one that is quieter, introspective, meditative. I think it's going to be one of the most appealing parts of this game for a number of people, because you have this gameplay model that's fairly mindless, just kind of running around a big map, ticking off map markers, and then you combine that with a quieter tone. That makes AC Shadows a very relaxing game to play in a way that previous ones weren't, and if that aspect hits right with you, I could definitely see people sticking with this one as a game you might play when you're listening to a podcast or just looking to chill out. Identity-wise, AC Shadows is a big departure from other modern AC games, and that's very obvious when you look at its refined game systems, its commitment to stealth, and its dual protagonist model. But this more subtle shift in volume is a much harder thing to spot, but it will definitely be one of the things that this game is remembered and celebrated for. When it comes to the more substantive aspects of world design, Assassin's Creed Shadows continues to adopt a familiar design model that is fundamentally bad. This is, again, a game that prioritizes copy and pasted square miles over properly curated space. This map is absolutely gigantic, with like 400,000 sync towers and so many temples and so many forts and so many outposts and so many towns, and all of them look really great, but they're ultimately just the same as one another. Even though they look different, they feel the same and they have the same objectives, and you spend so little time in each of them that you never come to know or care about them. I definitely reflect on my recent time with Kingdom Come Deliverance II. Now that was a game that had only 2 maps, a dozen towns, and 1 city. But after spending 100 hours with that game, I knew the layout of those towns and that city. I knew the roads that connected those villages. I remember vividly some of the adventures that I had in those fields and in the forest and in the underground mines. My connection to space in that game could not have been any stronger. And in terms of sheer real estate, KCD's Bohemia is like 1/50th of the total landmass that AC Shadows offers. I just think this model of massive, endless, repetitive space is fundamentally bad, and I desperately hope that Ubisoft one day abandon it. And see, Ubisoft takes things a step further with how much they undermine your relationship to space, because the majority of the objectives you have to complete in the open world actually can't be completed without the aid of X-ray vision that highlights your objectives for you. So for example, there are dozens of these temples laying around the map, and in order to complete them, you need to find 3 lost scrolls that are hidden in each location. Okay, sounds kind of interesting, right? Well, no, because what you actually need to do when you get there is just hold down the left trigger, which highlights any collectible resource and highlights your objectives. So you're not truly looking at this temple and exploring its nooks and crannies in search of these scrolls. You're just looking for the white dots so that you can press a button on it, and that's the objective completed. Like, how is that fun? The exact same thing applies to main objectives in this game, where you're sent to kill a guy or find some clue. All you do is hold down the left trigger so you can see the blue dot, and then you head towards that. And it's not like you can not use this system, because the spaces that you're exploring are so large that the only practical way that Ubisoft can guide players towards objectives is to literally highlight them. So this whole approach to level design, to space, to copy and pasted locations, to X-ray vision, these are all things that have defined modern AC games, and I think they are very bad. They have not changed or been improved here in AC Shadows, and so while this environment looks stunning, and while the vibe of exploration feels quieter and more serene, it is ultimately just as unfulfilling and mindless as it's ever been. Myriad Shadows takes its biggest swings in its core gameplay, progression, and itemization. Much of what's been done here is a success, and you can feel how eager Ubisoft were to respond to criticisms leveled at the previous games. Almost all of these responses are pitch perfect. It's where Ubisoft tries to innovate beyond that things really go off the rails. Before that though, let's talk about what works. The modern AC trilogy has copped a lot of flack for how much it moved away from the stealth and assassination thing. They were basically action games with some optional stealth thrown in. Mirage was an offshoot title that re-centered the assassin fantasy, and it was well received in large part because people enjoyed seeing the franchise return to that stealth focus. For me though, I didn't enjoy AC Mirage because I was like, well, I've already experienced all of this stuff years ago. Mirage made no effort to evolve its stealth model, and the various upgrades available in your progression tree only made stealth easier, not more interesting. AC Shadows follows in Mirage's footsteps in that it re-centers the stealth fantasy, but it goes beyond Mirage because it evolves the core elements of that formula while also delivering a progression tree that makes stealth more interesting as your playthrough progresses. Now to be clear, a lot of what I'm talking about here is specific to Nawe. Yasuke can stealth and he can assassinate targets, but there's a lot that this guy can't do, to the point where if stealth is your preferred playstyle, as mine was, you're almost never going to choose to play as Yasuke. Nawe embodies the assassin fantasy brilliantly. She has all the traditional things you'd expect if you've played the recent games: the hidden blade, leaping assassinations, being able to distract or lure guards, etc. But there's plenty of new stuff as well. Some of it comes from Nawe's background as a shinobi, where she can use kunai to silently take down targets from a distance, and later on you can unlock smoke bombs or throwable bells that you can use to lure guards away from you or break line of sight so you can disappear. Separate to that, both Nawe and Yasuke can go fully prone, allowing them to hide in knee-deep grass, and in the case of Nawe, allows her to access some crawl spaces that open up new pathways through levels. The prone stuff is cool, but to be honest, it isn't utilized all that much. Something similar could be said of the game's new light and dark system, where Nawe can become basically invisible when she's in the shadows, and she can extinguish light sources to help make this happen. It's a promising idea that ultimately becomes a bit of a novelty, given that you have numerous other, more powerful techniques at your disposal to avoid or neutralize threats. And the level design never forces you into situations where you need to rely on the shadows to avoid being detected. Would have been great for Ubisoft to have included some more curated missions that might have made better use of this feature, but sadly they didn't. A more profound improvement is the grapple, and let me tell you, this thing totally rules, and it absolutely enlarges the stealth sandbox in a way that's going to be hard to go back from in future games. The grapple lets you swing across spaces, but it's used more regularly as a means of going straight up, which opens up new pathways through levels that wouldn't be possible if you were relying on just parkour. It's also just an extremely cool feeling to like leap down from a rooftop to assassinate a dude and then immediately grapple straight back up. It's like the closest we're going to get to a modern day Tenchu game. Jokes aside, this grapple is genuinely fantastic, and combined with how quick and responsive Nawe is and how smooth her animations are, stealth is back on the menu, boys. Parkour is another area where Shadows makes some subtle but notable improvements, in the sense that you can't climb every surface. You do need to find ledges and handholds rather than just pushing forward into a sheer rock face and being able to climb it. It's a bit of a disappointment that there aren't more creative parkour sequences to be found in the main missions, but there are a few parkour challenges hidden out in the open world, so that's better than nothing. So it's really great to see Shadows make all of these changes, recentering the assassin fantasy, deepening some systems while refining others. Thumbs up across the board. It is utterly baffling then that one of the two main characters in this video game is specifically designed to not take advantage of all of this stuff. And this is when we have to start talking about Yasuke. Now, if you're at all unawares, Yasuke and Nawe are two very distinct protagonists. She is a shinobi assassin with access to every part of the game's sandbox: parkour, stealth, assassinations, and full frontal combat. Yasuke also has access to all parts of the sandbox, but it's a greatly reduced level of access when it comes to everything bar combat. So he can stealth, but he's slower to move and he doesn't have a grapple. He can parkour, but he can't climb up anything taller than like 8 feet. He can assassinate targets, but it's only a brutal assassination, which is loud, and it has a very long animation that leaves him exposed while doing it.
Hey!
So look, as I said in the intro, I think this was a really interesting experiment. I can absolutely see the design meeting where this goes up on a whiteboard and it gets kicked around and it gets greenlit on the premise that it's truly innovative for the AC formula. And we're always accusing AC games of being safe and repetitive, so what could be a more bold response to that criticism than a move like this? But the truth is, I really can't see how this made it through the prototyping phase, because Yasuke is such a massive step down in terms of his kit that it's almost comical at times. Like, you actually spend the first 10 hours of this game playing exclusively as Nawe, and in that time, you are fully immersed in her fantasy, you are polishing up your stealth chops and you're climbing all over shit, and it feels great. When you finally get control of Yasuke, you're like, what the fuck is this? He is so slow and clunky to control, he just doesn't feel good to use. Then you clamber up your first ledge and see him struggle to lift his weight. It takes him so long to do it, and you're like, hurry up, bro, I got places to be. I remember I tried to cross a rope at one point because that's something I'd been doing for the preceding 10 hours, and you can imagine how well that went. And then, of course, there was the first time I did the signature leap of faith.
I am getting too old for this.
And I get the joke, absolutely. It's charming that this guy isn't as graceful as Nawe is, sure. But the joke stops being funny when it's literally impeding my ability to enjoy the game, because Yasuke's limitations are so egregious that they regularly suck the fun out of what you're doing. And I'll give you a perfect example. There are these tombs hidden throughout the world, and they're like underground traversal challenges full of rock climbing and grappling, etc. They're almost all built for Nawe, but one of them is designed exclusively for Yasuke. And I head into this thing, and I come to this room, and the way out of the room is in like the top left, and I need to climb up a fairly short ledge in order to reach it. It's the kind of height that Nawe could handle with her eyes closed, but Yasuke cannot make that jump. And I'm really stuck at this point, and I was like, maybe I went the wrong way, maybe I missed a turn earlier in the tomb and what I'm seeing is actually an exit. And then I see to my left this bookshelf looking thing, and on the ground I see some scratch marks, and I'm like, oh no, that can't be it. Sure enough, I had to move this fucking bookshelf in place so that Yasuke could climb onto it to reach this slightly higher ledge. And while I was doing it, I felt like Nawe would have just been looking down on us like,
look what they need to mimic a fraction of our power.
It was just crazy that Ubisoft thought this shit would be fun in an Assassin's Creed game. And the honest truth is that I played Yasuke very little during my playthrough, as little as I could in fact. I kind of decided that that would be my approach after my preview, and that decision was vindicated when straight after I got control of Yasuke, after playing for 10 hours as Nawe, I encountered this wall. Immediately after that, like literally 30 seconds later, I encountered this sink tower, which Yasuke had no means of climbing. So I had to go into my menu, switch to Nawe, sit through the loading sequence, and then continue on as her. It was at that moment I was like, yeah, no, there's no way I can do this. So I switched to Nawe and I stuck with her for the majority of my playthrough. Hearing all of this, you might be wondering, okay, so he sucks at the assassin stuff. How is he in combat? Is it worth the trade-off? Well, it's a complicated question to answer, because combat here is a real mixed bag. Overall, it's just not very good. It's not terrible, but it's just not up to par in 2025. It has really nice, cool looking animations, and so watching this, you probably think, hey, that looks sick, but it's all predicated on an overly simplistic combat model that's generally about breaking an enemy's guard, deflecting their attacks, and chipping away at their large health pools. Enemy animations are often very inconsistent too, slow in one instance and then lightning fast the next. The enemy variety is very limited, and even when new enemies are introduced, they just have different movesets that still demand the exact same approach from you. I give the game a lot of credit for its itemization and progression though. Valhalla had a problem where not enough loot was dropping, and Odyssey had too much. They found a real sweet spot here where item upgrades come at a steady clip, and the different bonuses on them do allow you to specialize in a specific weapon style, or focus more on a specific attack type, or focus on status debuffs. It is simple, but it definitely works. The skill trees are another success. Valhalla had one of the worst skill trees in the history of video games, and I am not exaggerating when I say that. Hundreds and hundreds of stupid nodes that did next to nothing, with no ability to even see where the most valuable upgrades were because the nodes were all hidden. Absolute insanity. They've addressed all of that here, and we've got fewer nodes. Most of them have a tangible impact on your playstyle or power, with new abilities being meted out throughout your playthrough, so you can genuinely look forward to putting points into that tree, because generally speaking, you're going to unlock something you can actually feel. I also give a lot of praise to the fact that there are a number of distinct weapon types in this game, and they really do find their place in the combat sandbox. There are weapons that excel in 1v1 dueling, in dealing with large groups of enemies, in breaking armor, in applying status debuffs. The weapons each have beautiful animations and finishes and unique abilities tied to the skill trees. Genuinely great stuff here that makes me lament how weak the underlying combat model is, because as fun as it is to use these weapons, they can't make up for how scrappy and underbaked that core combat feels. So coming back to that earlier question about Yasuke, are the trade-offs worth it? Does he excel in combat in the way that he should? Well, the answer to that is yes, but to a degree that absolutely breaks the game. Yasuke is so powerful that he is borderline invincible while also dealing a truckload of damage, while also having access to more heals and sustain, while also being able to interrupt unblockable enemy attacks. The list goes on and on. He is just straight up broken. The truth is, the tuning of Nawe is absolutely flawless because she is a character focused on stealth, and when you get spotted and it's time to throw down, she can hold her own, but you have to really focus. You are weak, you don't deal a lot of damage, every encounter demands your full attention, and that strengthens the overall game loop because it makes the stakes of getting spotted all the higher. Yasuke though, he's just like an I win button in combat. When you are playing as Nawe, it feels like you're fighting for your life in every encounter. When you are playing as Yasuke, it feels like you are playing GTA and you are trying to get a 5-star wanted level with cheats enabled. Yasuke's one job was to provide a more compelling combat experience, but his tuning does the exact opposite of that. He literally sucks all the fun out of combat by being so overtuned, and coupled with his restrictions outside of combat, I genuinely can't understand why Ubisoft designed this guy the way that they did. If you do play through Shadows, I really recommend playing as much Nawe as possible, but to be honest, I don't think anyone really needs that recommendation because I'm all but certain that everyone is going to come to that same conclusion themselves.
Nobody gets out alive.
Hit them hard.
From here, you see the real threat in action.
Alright, to conclude, let's reckon with the title of this video. When I don't offer a clear recommendation in the title, it means I'm pretty mixed on it, and you might be thinking to yourself, you sound pretty down on this one, why aren't you not recommending it? Well, I'd like to reiterate many of the positives I've listed throughout this review. At 40 hours, this is a much more manageable playthrough that doesn't exhaust you in the same way that Valhalla did. Technically, it's extremely sound, arguably one of the most technically polished Ubisoft releases ever. Visually, it's breathtaking, and together with music, sound design, weather seasons, and a number of the side activities, AC Shadows has a serene quality that I think will come to define it as we speak about it in the years to come. In terms of core gameplay, there's a lot to celebrate here too. Nawe feels fantastic to control, and she's every bit the shinobi assassin we wanted to control since this franchise began. Subtle things like the ability to go prone and the ability to meld into the shadows are nice, but the grapple is a real game changer and opens up entirely new opportunities for stealthing, parkour, and assassinations. Weapon diversity is also great, as are the skill trees and itemization that deepen the way those weapons are used. In this specific regard, Ubisoft definitely reflected on everything they got right and wrong in the previous games, and they've done great work here. So all of those things are good, but I think there's a more important thing that's guiding the way I'm talking about this game and whether or not I recommend it, and it's this. You already know what this is. In fact, similar to what I said of Far Cry 6, you've already played this video game. The question is, do you want to play it again? And me saying to you, nah man, don't do that, it doesn't really make any sense because you already know what you're getting yourself into. Now, my hope going into this was that I'd be able to recommend AC Shadows. As I mentioned at the top of this review, this is a franchise that could be so much more than what it is, but I think it's built on some very weak foundations that Ubisoft did not address here in Shadows. Writing is the biggest one. It's truly awful, and I almost feel bad for the writers because I can see that when they aren't hamstrung by this bullshit game structure, they can actually develop good characters and tell good stories. But structured as it is, this game was doomed from the start in the exact same way Mirage was. Ubisoft's approach to open world design in Shadows repeats all of the mistakes they've made over and over again this past decade. Massive worlds that mean absolutely nothing to you, repetitive objectives made even more mindless by their reliance on X-ray vision solving the puzzles for you. I just think this entire open world design philosophy needs to be thrown out, but I can't imagine Ubisoft doing that anytime soon. Combat is another core weakness. It's just not good enough. Comparing it to Ghost of Tsushima is a night and day comparison. And to be clear, Tsushima's combat isn't exactly genre defining. If you're going to be basing the majority of your 40-hour long open world game on combat, then that combat needs to be a lot better than what we have here. And finally, there's Yasuke. I think he will be remembered as an odd question mark in the annals of this series. A really interesting premise for a character that is squandered by poor storytelling and then utterly ruined by baffling design choices that make him too weak in some areas and too strong in others. It is a real shame to see how he's been handled given what could have been achieved with him. The Yasuke stuff aside, all of my complaints about AC Shadows are pretty predictable. They too fall into that category of you knowing what they are before having even experienced them for yourself. For many people, these things won't be deal breakers, and the allure of another historically inspired, map marker clearing Ubisoft adventure is all they need to get them over the line. And to these people I say, God bless, Godspeed. I really do think you're going to enjoy this one, because Ubisoft have put a lot of work into refining something that you already love. But for everybody else, myself included, AC Shadows is just another one, and I did not need another one of these games at this point in my life. I still fervently believe that the potential of this franchise is immense, and I look forward to the day when Ubisoft has the courage to realize that potential, but it's definitely not today. You've no doubt heard of this video sponsor SteelSeries for their award-winning peripherals, but did you know that they actually started out as a mousepad company? It's true, back in 2001, they released the first ever gaming mousepad, and a few years after that, they launched the QCK Heavy, which has since become one of the most popular gaming mousepads in the world within the pro gaming scene. The SteelSeries are not one to rest on their laurels, so they decided to take things up a notch this year with the release of their all-new QCK Performance line. It is the first major Surface update they've made to their mousepad lineup in 21 years, and it comes with not one new surface, not two new surfaces, but 3 new surfaces, each with different levels of resistance so you can choose what's right for you and the sort of games you play. SteelSeries actually sent me all 3 of these to try out, and I can confirm absolutely they definitely have a very different profile in terms of how each of them feel. The speed mat is silky smooth, allowing your mouse to glide effortlessly. Great for Twitch shooters where that kind of responsiveness is key, or games where you have to track fast moving targets. On the opposite end of the spectrum is the control mat, which provides more resistance. I found this was really good for more PvE based shooters like Destiny or Borderlands, where you don't need to move your mouse quite as fast, but you still want to be able to track targets reliably. If you're after something that sits between the two, you're in luck. The balance mat is exactly that, offering a level of precision suitable for all occasions. And as someone who moves back and forth between a variety of games all the time, then this is the one I eventually stuck with, and I've been super happy with it since. I think their minimalistic jet black design looks super sleek. They've each got a weight and thickness to them that gives them such a premium feel, and the edges haven't frayed at all in the time that I've been using them. Perhaps most importantly, their non-slip rubber base means they never move around when I'm using them, which definitely can't be said of all other mouse pads. Whether you're in the market for a mouse pad or any other gaming peripheral, SteelSeries products are industry leading. That is a genuine truth, by the way. Go look up reviews and you will see that in every category, SteelSeries stuff racks up awards left, right, and center. With a mix of functionality, quality, and reliability, SteelSeries has cemented an enviable reputation, and I'm very proud to have them as a channel partner. They've actually been a channel partner for the last 3 years, and they just re-signed for a 4th year. So they're a really big supporter of what we do around here, and I'd love it if you could check out their stuff. I think you're gonna be really happy with it. Best of all, you can actually get a nice discount for doing so. Visit SteelSeries.com for 12% off when you use offer code SkillUp at checkout. No strings attached. That's 12% off when you use offer code at SkillUp over at SteelSeries.com. I'll leave a link to the new QCK Performance mousepads down below. Thank you, SteelSeries, for sponsoring this video and a bunch of others, and thank you for watching it.